Rebel Moon was awful, and Zack Snyder should be embarrassed. Dune Part 1 and 2 were good, but not overly financially successful, and the cultural footprint and memes seem to have died. The Avatar movies come in and get all of the money and leave without anyone noticing. Predator Badlands, while appear to have okay word of mouth, still flopped. And Star Wars is on fire. And they think they can claw some goodwill back with The Mandalorian and the Green Fucker and Ryan Gosling.
Not a great plan.
Star Trek is resigned to TV shows no one watches, and the occasional rumor that J.J. Abrams and his cast are totally willing to do another movie. At least that is what all the clickbait headlines from failing pop culture news sites say. So with that bleak picture of the current state of high science fiction painted, what does the future of high sci-fi look like? So for the purposes of this video, when I talk about science fiction movies, I'm referring to, exploring the stars, alien races, futuristic technology that can border on the magic, and those kinds of things. So, things that range from like Star Trek to Star Wars, or anything that could be before in between. Probably not the best gauge. I'm counting out things like the recent flop of The Running Man, things where it's a dystopian Earth that is pretty much the same as today, but slightly more fancy, potentially flying cars, more up-to-date touchpads, and better holograms. I mean, those ones that feel like a totally different universe and Earth, those kinds of things. But anyway, science fiction has always been pretty regulated to TV. Star Wars was really the first major breakout franchise, and Star Trek had a decent run as well. But then Disney bought Star Wars, and J.J. Abrams took a crack at both franchises. Well, J.J. and others. So now, Star Trek is embarrassed by a stream of a Spock action figure and the fact that it outdoes them on YouTube. And the Star Wars movies don't guarantee money, one of the reasons why they haven't put one out in years. And the shows are failing, or at least not being talked about. Dune Part 3 is coming out soon, but there's not much hype around it, and apparently the book it's based on is not the best, and the rest of the series is pretty rough, so they don't even plan on adapting those, or at least doesn't intend to. So, what else is there? Hollywood doesn't take chances on an IP that they can't reboot or remake for the alleged pre-existing audience, and there isn't much in terms of high-selling books coming out that they can adapt. Most books, even close, are fantasy novels. There's all the George R.R. Martin stuff being adapted, and Brandon Sanderson allegedly has just made a deal. And then there's the romantic-y smut lady books that are being adapted now. And most of those are just TV shows and not movies. Not to say TV shows are a bad thing. When you go to a bookstore these days, the sci-fi and fantasy section is always a bit disappointing in its size compared to other sections. And, that little thing of sci-fi tagged along with fantasy even more so. It's mostly just Dune and like Disney Star Wars books. There is, though, one series that's always there at the bookstore that feels right for adapting. But before I get more into that, I want to hit a couple of notes first. In most bookshops, if you just turn your head a bit while you're in the sci-fi fantasy section, you can casually spot the manga. While I think most anime and manga live-action adaptations are pretty shit, I think you can still get a lot of inspiration from it if you are a Hollywood writer that just can't be bothered to be creative themselves. Like Cowboy Bebop and Space Dandy, Trigun, and most mech anime. Well, I think mechs would be a bit of a CGI and budget ballooning kind of idea. That whole bounty hunter in space, or just renegade in space, I think is a great idea. Kind of what the Mandalorian series should have been. Described like a Western in space. I think that's something a lot of people would be interested in. It's like, and I'll come back to that point in a little bit. Sci-fi, whether movies or TVs, has always had a focus on the writing and characters because the budgets and the effects were always just too low or hard to do. Or, on the other side, if you're like George Lucas, you wanted to push the possibilities of technology in order to create these effects and worlds. But I think going back to that mindset of the good writing and characters for the cheaper sets and effects should probably make a comeback. If you get some cheap sets and you use lots of practical and just CGI mixed in, I think you could get a like Clint Eastwood Man with No Name kind of sci-fi movie within a decent budget. But then you gotta get like aliens in there and make it feel like a whole another universe. You know, you could even do the whole it's a desert like planet somewhere else and just kind of make everything in the surrounding feel kind of weird. You know, grab a Nerf gun and spray paint it with just a little more jazz in there. There's good, cheap, easy ways to make something feel sci-fi-y. Just look at the Fallout show. This is kind of why I think people would be interested in a Western in space. I am not a fan of the Fallout show, and we'll see if I even attempt to watch season 2 and review it and go through all the dislike and comment shit again. But it is pretty much a fact that most people love and agree that the ghoul is the best part of the show. And he is that charismatic bit of a dick, seasoned to the harshness of reality, cowboy-esque character. He's the one that's had the most staying power. He's the one that's been talked about. He's the one that's memed about. He's the one that's had some of the creative dialogue.
Thou shalt get sidetracked by bullshit every goddamn time.
So take a character like him, but don't surround him with nothing but idiots, just bundling their way through plots aimlessly. And instead of a 70s wasteland, put him in space and fill it with all kinds of creatures and aliens and things for him to do. But hey, I know Hollywood will never just take inspiration from things and put them together. They have to straight up adapt and ruin something else. So surely there are older sci-fi novels that were never adapted from like the 80s and 90s that can be made today. And you know what? Again, back to what I was hinting at before. There is a series that is almost finished, and from what I can tell, pretty popular amongst book people. So much so that I have even read the first book of the series and plan on continuing to read the rest of it. And you know what? I think it is pretty ripe for adapting and could probably be adapted pretty well. Maybe not, let's say Hollywood today, but still there is a lot of potential. And that series is the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. I mean, the setting would primarily be set in a forest and castle, and the characters are pretty great if done correctly. There is plenty of actual fantasy parts being set on Mars. There are definitely going to be shots and technology that they can do to make you go, oh, this ain't Earth. But it's nothing that's too different from what's been done before. And then that potential for some really unique and interesting cinematography in the use of color is immense. I think it could be huge with 7 movies, one for each book. But I honestly don't think something like that will happen, or at least be done good, because even though Avatar made money and the technology has made it easier than ever before to make something in the sci-fi genre, there still hasn't been a real worldwide phenomenal hit with staying power to make Hollywood want to shift out of the superhero and remake market and into the sci-fi. Long gone are the days of taking chances or making a movie that you can really be proud of. So if you're not going to take a chance on sci-fi in order to make it become that big, great phenomenon, then it's never going to pivot. If you only ever stick to remaking the things what you know, you're going to keep remaking the same shit and nothing will get better. And so many of these movies that have been made today just feel disconnected from the general American and film goer. And they're just always so formulaic. Get that algorithm, say those things off screen so the people on their phones know what's going on. Or so many of them just feel made by committee or by union regulation, by check marks they have to do. And while technology has made the ability to make something like a sci fi movie easier to do, it still hasn't quite reached the level to where, like, an indie film could really just do it justice in a reasonable amount of time in front of a lot of eyes. So for now, I think the sci fi genre is stuck in TV and the very occasional movie that is on the lighter dystopian sci-fi side, which is sad because there seems to be a real gap in that market. And I think if it's done right with a lot of care, it could make a studio a fortune.